name is Scott Hills, and I joined Chevron in 1989. That I basically got into GIS within a few years, and was in it for the rest of my career. So, which ended when I retired in 2019.
I'm Bill Wally, retired from Chevron about 20 years ago now.
My name is Greg Slutz, and I worked first for Texaco for 25 years, from 1975 till 2000, when we had the merger with Chevron. And then I worked an additional 15 years with Chevron, Texaco's Chevron, till I retired in 2015. And during that time, I worked on GIS probably for 25 years. It started around 1990, something like that.
At the time, Bill Wally was at the lab with me, and he had already been dabbling in GIS, and we were trying to find a project to sort of demonstrate the utility of it. But certainly the first real opportunity was a deployment to our new business unit called Tengiz Chevroil. Okay, so Tengiz Chevroil at the time was the first invitation to try a deployment. And that meant a deployment anywhere in the company, not just upstream or downstream. We're talking about 1993 at this point. Eventually got sidelined, unfortunately, because TCO was severely bottlenecked in terms of their production because there was no pipeline at the time. All of the oil had to go out by rail. So they had to cut back on expenses seriously for a while. The next opportunity was Chevron Nigeria Limited. I and a couple other guys sort of led a study team at the invitation of CNL to come over there and look at the opportunity to deploy on-site a business unit level enterprise deployment. But it became the model, and it was so successful. Actually, for me, it was a little more successful than I would like, because I ended up with 3 teams reporting to me. Just before I left there, Tengiz Chevroil sort of took a run at it again, and this time the deployment, I was on the study team again, sort of on loan from Chevron Nigeria, and we actually ended up with a successful deployment there as well.
When I first started with Texaco in GIS for about 10 years before the Chevron merger, there was no GIS department. It was individuals who were interested in GIS within the business units, supporting it and doing most of the work for the teams. Whereas on the Chevron side, I found out after the merger, was more of a team. They had actually 2 teams, one here in Houston, which was 3 or 4 senior people like Bill Wally and so forth. But they had that team. Then they had the San Ramon team, which was another group of about 6 or 8 people with their own team leader out there. So they combined the 2 groups, and I became the GIS remote sensing team leader for the San Ramon group and for Houston as one team. So it was about 14 or 15 of us at that time.
If Bill didn't elaborate on this in his 3.5 hours, I'll make the comment that although he was involved in the initial deployment, in fact, he hand carried over the, I shouldn't say hand carried because it was actually checked luggage. But, at that point in 1995, at this point, everything was running on Spark stations, Sun workstations, with running Solaris. And he stuffed what was going to be our GIS server into a suitcase, checked luggage, and then pulled it out of the checked luggage and walked, basically hand carried it from the Lagos airport to the Lekki compound, where it became the server for that point. And really, that was I'm not sure every protocol was followed, shall we say, in all cases, but that was our solution to the accelerated deployment schedule that we had set for ourselves. If we had gone through the standard order from the US, ship across the Atlantic, go through customs, we would have been 6 to 8 months behind that schedule.
I think 747 must have come in or something. And all of a sudden, there's about 100 sheikhs and all kinds of people that all have first class lounge. So they're all coming by. So we snuck in anyway. So now we're all sitting in the back of the first class lounge, and so Jack says, oh, you guys got in. You want a beer? And I said, yeah. So he gets up and he goes. He had this sport coat, this Harris tweed sport coat, which I bet he still has from Harvard. He went to Harvard, and it's got patches on the sleeves and stuff. And he comes back. It had a bunch of pockets, so he comes back with about 20 bottles of beer stuffed in all his pockets. And then he talks about how he got in the oil business, which I didn't know. And he said, yes, when ESRI got started, they were an environmental consulting company. If you're laying out a $100 million golf course or something like this, or a community like Woodlands or something like this, it's really complicated. You got to look at the elevations and the soils and the rivers and floodplains and all this kind of stuff. So it's very complicated. And when he first got his degree, of course, they didn't have computers for any of this stuff. So it was really complicated stuff. He said he started the company with 2 other guys. And after the first year, he bought out the other 2 guys. And he said they were really struggling to make money. And one of his Harvard contacts in Japan found out that the Libyan National Oil Company wanted a aeromagnetic survey over Western Libya. And so Jack makes an offer of $1 million and he gets the job. Then he had to find a plane, and he finds this plane that needs to be rebuilt, and he finds some guy in Greece to rebuild the plane. He finds somebody else that has an airborne gravimeter and magnetometer. He finds somebody else that's got a positioning system. He finds some guy that is a computer data center manager, where the computer's not very busy on the weekends, and so this guy's going to give him some computer time to run the computer programs. And so he said he made 4 trips to Libya. He said, so anyway, they got the job, they did the survey, and he said when it was all done, they made $100,000 profit on the job, and it saved the company that year. And so that was his first experience with the oil industry. It saved the ESRI. I said this to other people. I've met Larry Ellison, I've met Bill Gates, and Jack Dangermond is the greatest man I've ever met.